Ever feel like the IELTS listening section is just designed to trick you? Well, you are definitely not alone. But what if I told you that those so-called tricks are actually a roadmap to getting a higher score? In this explainer, we're going to flip the script and turn your biggest frustration into your biggest advantage.
Oh man, we've all been there, right? You're locked in, listening to the audio, you hear the exact word, the perfect number, you scribble it down, feeling like a champion, and then you check the answers. And it's wrong. You're left just scratching your head. How is that even possible? You heard it so clearly.
This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's not in your imagination. This is a very real, very deliberate part of the test. It's called the IELTS Listening Trap. And just knowing it exists is the first step to completely dismantling it. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll break down the trap itself. Then we're going to expose the sneaky little words that make these traps work. After that, we'll build a toolkit to spot them, lay out a clear strategy to outsmart them, and finally, we'll see how this one skill makes you a way more confident English speaker in your everyday life. Okay, first things first, these listening traps aren't about being unfair. They're actually designed to mirror how people really speak. I mean, think about it. In a normal conversation, we correct ourselves, we change our minds, we say, oh, wait, actually I meant. The IELTS test isn't just checking if you can hear a single word, it's testing if you can follow a complete thought with all its twists and turns. The official term for these little traps is distractors. A distractor is basically bait. It's a piece of information that sounds totally correct at first, but then, and this is the key part, it gets changed or corrected. The test uses these to separate the people who react too fast from those who listen carefully for the final, confirmed answer. So, what's the secret sauce that makes these distractors so effective? Well, the answer is hiding in plain sight, right inside the English language itself. There are certain types of words that are just perfectly built to create confusion, either because they sound the same or they look the same but mean totally different things. These are the real culprits. We're going to zoom in on three main categories of these tricky words: homophones, homographs, and homonyms. Getting to know these guys is your secret weapon, not just for the test, but for really mastering English vocabulary. All right, it's time to build our toolkit. We're about to meet these word imposters face to face, and by the end of this section, I promise you'll be able to spot them from a mile away. First up, we have homophones. The clue is right there in the name. Homo means same, and phone means sound. So, same sound. These are words that sound exactly identical when you hear them, but they're spelled differently and have completely different meanings. This is a classic listening trap. Take flower and flower, for example. They sound exactly the same, right? So, if you're listening to a conversation about party planning and someone says, we need to get well, which one is it? Without that context, it is such an easy mistake to make. And here's another quick one, bear and bear. If you hear a sentence like, I saw a in the woods, you're relying entirely on the rest of the sentence to figure it out, because the sound is identical. Next, let's talk about homographs. This time, graph means writing. So these are words with the same spelling. The trick here is that not only do they have different meanings, but sometimes they even have different pronunciations. Context is absolutely everything. A perfect example is L-E-A-D. If it's pronounced lead, it means to guide someone. But if it's pronounced lead, it's that heavy metal. In a listening test, the pronunciation is the giveaway, but only if you're really paying attention to how it fits in the sentence. And finally, we have homonyms. You can think of these as the ultimate word imposters. They've got the same spelling and the same pronunciation, but different meanings. With these tricky words, context is literally your only guide. Just think about the word bat. It could be the little animal that flies around at night, or it could be the wooden stick you use in baseball. If someone says, look out for the bat, you're going to need a little more information to know what to do next, right? Okay, so we've identified the tricky words, we've built our toolkit, now for the most important part. How do we use this knowledge to create a winning strategy for the IELTS listening test? This is where we turn all that theory into actual points on your score sheet. So here's the secret. Most distractors follow a really predictable three-step pattern. First, a speaker will mention an initial idea. Then they'll pause or revise that idea. And finally, they'll state their final decision. Your job is to follow that entire journey and not get stuck back at step one.
And I'm not exaggerating here. The ability to follow a conversation through this pattern, that is often the key difference between a good score and a truly great score. It shows a much deeper level of understanding, and that is exactly what the examiners are looking for.
So here is your action plan. First, train your ears to listen for contrast words like but, however, or actually. Those are huge red flags that a change is coming. Second, wait for confirmation phrases like so just to confirm or okay, let's go with. And the most important rule of all, do not write down the very first answer you hear. Stay with the conversation until you get that final, locked-in answer.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The data proves it. Candidates who practice patient, controlled listening, the ones who wait for that final confirmation, consistently score higher than those who just jump on the first keyword they hear. Patience, in this case, literally translates to points. Now, let's zoom out for a minute, because this skill, it is so much bigger than just passing a test. Learning to spot these distractors and understand these tricky words is a fundamental part of becoming a truly fluent and confident speaker of English. So try to see this not just as a hurdle you have to get over, but as an opportunity. When you start to notice these little nuances, you begin to really appreciate just how clever and rich the English language is. And honestly, it makes the whole learning process a lot more fun. Let's end with this really powerful idea. Your goal isn't to listen faster. It's to listen with more control, more patience, and more focus. Speed will come naturally, but control is what earns you the points, and more importantly, it's what makes you a better communicator. So there you have it. We've demystified the IELTS listening trap and turned it into a concrete strategy. You now have the tools to spot these word imposters. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you know how to look for these hidden patterns, what other rules of English are just waiting for you to discover? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.